Howdy, Dennis Bradford here. Let's think some about being, feeling, and doing better. How to do one-handed energy testing for truth. Especially if you are just learning this important new skill, increase the odds that it'll work well for you. Ensure that you've adapted an attitude of clinical detachment and are emotionally calm. It also might be a good idea to review the 6 tips from the last video on, for example, being well hydrated with your energy in balance. There are many ways to do energy testing for truth. Although all require some practice to master, they're all simple. Since it'd be better if you weren't required to have a partner, in this video I explain one way of doing it yourself. There are multiple ways of doing it yourself. If you want to do it with a partner or want a different way to do it by yourself, simply search on YouTube and find an alternative. Since it'd be better if you were able to do it one-handed rather than two-handed, I'll here explain one way to do it that way. Again though, if you'd like a different way to do it one-handed, it's not difficult to find an alternative. There are 2 caveats. First, it may be that this particular method is not well suited to you for some reason or other. If so, that's not serious. Just find an alternative method. If you really struggle with the following method, or an alternative one, don't quit. Energy testing is too valuable. In the next video, I consider some grounds for inaccuracy. Second, whichever method you use, you must practice it to get good at it. Not everyone is able to use it. I recommend that you practice it for at least a few minutes daily. It's not only fun, but it's extremely useful. Once you realize that for yourself, getting sufficient daily practice will cease to be an issue. What question do you want answered? Except that energy testing cannot foretell the future, you can use it to ask anything about the present or past. Except for that one limitation, it's astounding that there are no limits on what statements you can use it to test. The muscular response will be either an on response or a not on response. An on response will keep the muscles you're using strong. This response is affirmative, true, or life-affirming. A not on response will instantly and momentarily weaken the muscles you're using. This response is negative, false, or life-denying. So, the energy test for truth is a specific muscular response to a specific stimulus. This entails that it cannot be used for open-ended questions. Instead, whatever question you want answered must be formulated as a specific declarative statement. Consider an example. Suppose that you're wondering whether or not to read a book you purchased. In the future, after you master energy testing, you may decide to test a book's calibration before purchasing it to avoid wasting money. You may use energy testing to determine whether or not you should read the book. Let's assume that you don't have a suitable partner and don't want to use both hands. No problem. At least if you're a philosopher, you usually don't want to waste life reading bad books, which are books that calibrate below your level of understanding. You want to read. So, the statement you use for testing should be something like, in the name of the highest good, on a logged energy scale of human consciousness from 1 to 1,000, where 200 indicates empowerment and 600 indicates sagehood, blank calibrates as true over 100. Of course, complete the statement with the name of the book. If the book calibrates at over 100, determine if it calibrates over 200, over 300, and so on. After you find a level above it, by receiving not on response, suppose, for example, that you discover that it calibrates at over 400, but not over 500. Test to determine if it calibrates at over 410. If it does, test for 420, 430, and so on until it fails. That'll give you a very good calibration for that book. If for some reason you want to, you may similarly calibrate it even more accurately. It's critical that the statement you use be specific. It cannot be, for example, something vague like, "This is a good book." Good for whom? Good for what purpose? Good in relation to what? Every calibrated level is relative to a specific scale. There's no reason not to use the energy scale from Richard Hawkins, previously discussed in this series, that's been used many, many tens or hundreds of thousands of times. The phrase, "in the name of the highest good," or some similar phrase, increases the accuracy of the test because it transcends self-interest. What, though, should you do to test that statement by yourself with one hand? Lie back, sit, or stand with your legs uncrossed. With one hand, hold the book against your lower abdomen, ideally about 4 inches below your belly button. It doesn't matter whether or not you use your dominant hand. Make a circular OK sign with the other hand. Replace your forefinger with your fourth finger. You'll now be making a modified OK sign with your thumb and ring finger. The nail of your fourth finger will be pressing firmly against your thumbprint. The chief reason practice is required is to ensure that you're using about the same amount of pressure each time. You're using your fourth finger rather than your forefinger because you're more likely to use too much force with your forefinger. Say the statement you're testing out loud or just focus mentally on it. Either your thumb will continue to hold your ring finger in check, or it won't and it'll release it. If it continues to hold it in check, that means that the statement is true. If it doesn't and releases it, that means that the statement is false. Amazing! If you've purchased some more books on your to-read list, test each to determine whether or not you should bother to read it. If you take nutritional supplements and wonder whether or not you're wasting your money, test each to determine whether or not you should continue to purchase it. If you're ordering a meal at a restaurant, you can use the method discreetly with your hand on your lap, where it's unlikely to be noticed by others, to help you decide which menu items to order. The more you practice this method properly, the more effective you'll find it, and the more you'll begin to rely on it. There's no reason not to use this method daily. You now have in your arsenal an extremely potent weapon. In the next video, I consider potential problems using it. Let's end emotional distress.